My name is Dave Hollenbach, the host of From Embers to Excellence. My goal is to explore the many facets of leadership from the perspectives of some amazing people. In addition to leadership, I like to discuss mental health, PTSD, and overcoming adversity. If you have a favorite episode, I would love to hear about it. Message me through social media or my website, and I will share some free tools to help you achieve your goals. Please like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you haven't purchased your copy of my book, Fireproof, please grab a copy today. Thanks for listening. Today I'm speaking with Dr. Stanley Andrisse. He is the author of From Prison Cells to Ph.D. He is an endocrinologist, scientist, and assistant professor at Howard University College of Medicine, researching type 2 diabetes and insulin resistance. Dr. Andrisse holds a visiting professorship at Georgetown University Medical Center and held an adjunct professorship at Johns Hopkins Medicine after completing his postdoctoral training. Dr. Andrisse completed his PhD at St. Louis University and his MBA and bachelor's degree at Lindenwood University. That's where he played 3 years of Division II collegiate football. His service commitments include executive director and founder of From Prison Cells to Ph.D., a board member on the formerly incarcerated College Graduates Network, past president of the Johns Hopkins Postdoctoral Association, founder of the Diversity Postdoctoral Alliance, a member on several local and national committees aimed at community outreach. He's a youth mentor, motivational speaker, and community activist. So, Dr. Andrisse, thank you very much for coming on and having this conversation with me. As we talk today, it's November 8th, so election day, and I know
Big
that
day.
you're quite busy today. So thank you very much for taking the time to talk with me, and
Sure.
really been looking forward to digging in and getting to hear all about your story, man. This is really cool. So thanks.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here and definitely looking forward to jumping into our conversation, connecting with your audience and, sharing a little bit on the work that I do within the many hats that I wear.
And we were talking earlier, your book released last year, last
Yeah.
August. So it's available really anywhere people want to get it. But you do have a website, and I will have that in the show notes so people can uh, link up with you, follow you on social media, and see all the great things that you're doing.
Yeah, definitely at Prison to Pro is our organizational hat tagline or feed, and at prof underscore Andrisse is mine. So Professor Andrisse. Um, yeah, I mean, I'm open to start wherever you would like in the conversation. I could kind of give some things from the beginning. We could jump into the work wherever you want to start. I'm open to it.
All right. Well, what I always do is ask a few questions about where you were born and raised, and what life was like when you were growing up. So I know
Yeah.
from reading a little bit about you that you grew up in St. Louis, in the St. Louis area. So
Yeah.
is that where you were born?
Yeah, so I was born in St. Louis, an area called U City, which was most known for the from the early 2000s rapper Nelly. My sisters actually went to school with Nelly at University City or U City. And we were in U City, which was, had a lot of its challenges. And we were in a I am the youngest of five. My family are Haitian immigrants. My family actually bounced around the U.S. from Miami to New York to Detroit before, landing in St. Louis, and mostly just for challenges of money and, trying to find a place to really settle in where there was, it was a time in the country where there was a lot of challenges, particularly with Haitian immigrants and refugees. So it was quite a challenge, and I talk about that in my book on what it is to be an immigrant, any type of immigrant family in our country, and what the history of that kind of looks like, but particularly a Caribbean or Haitian immigrant in that particular time. There was a viewpoint of what people from that part of the world was, and Haiti, of course, being one of the, still one of the poorest countries in the world, and all the challenges it faced. So I talk about that, and that was a very big part of my upbringing. I was raised very much this Haitian immigrant. But in U City, our home was a um, one bedroom for the five kids and my parents, and can remember quite vividly sleeping in the basement with my two other brothers in this tiny bed, and just it was challenging, but I never, and I talk about it in the book, I didn't look at it as like I didn't see those challenges, as I was tiny, so I didn't understand that that we were struggling financially or anything like that. It was really happy times that I could recall. And then we moved to an area in St. Louis called the Ferguson Florissant area, which of course everybody knows quite a bit about that because of the death of Mike Brown and all the things that happened after that. And then so, I moved into that area, and it was, a move up from where we were at in U City. Um, and what I can recall about that is things that I now know, what's called the over policing and the excessive use of force, and the information that came out from the Department of Justice report after all the things that happened in Ferguson. That was just kind of life to me. It's an all black area in the North St. Louis region, and there was always police around. Like I can recall it as early as 8 years old, having cops pull a gun out on me. And, I can recall just running from the cops and knowing that, the cops didn't like us, we didn't like the cops, and um, it was this idea that they weren't there to help us, and there was this idea that they saw us as bad people. And so you grow up, and you're 8 years old. You don't, the way that you process that, the way that I processed that was, there's a lot of cops around here because there's a lot of criminals and bad people. Like we're getting guns pulled on us because we're doing bad and we're bad people. And so, I get a little bit older, and I, get into junior high and high school. And by that time, I was arrested for the first time at 14 years old. Had already started selling drugs before I was even a teenager. And so, I moved into the criminal legal system very young, but even before that, I can recall like in junior high, and probably even in elementary school, just always being in detention and suspension. And by the time I was in high school, I was threatened to be kicked out and expelled on numerous occasions. What saved me was that I was a three-sport athlete, and the disciplinary principal was actually my track coach. Now, and I was really just a track star. I was really fast. And so that was like my saving grace. Had I not had that, I would have definitely been kicked out of school, like many of the people that I had already started hanging out with. A lot of people I was hanging out with were high school dropouts, and got into selling drugs, and they're in this community that already is seen as people who are bad, drug dealers, criminals. Um, but what I was getting at is, as a young kid, what you from the time that you have, police presence and guns being pulled at you, you're just a little baby. Um, it just built the sense that, well, this is the life that I'm supposed to be living. And the people in school, I had my athletic talents being nurtured, but my intellectual potential really wasn't being nurtured. And more so, the teachers in my life really were just like, "You're from that area? Like that's where all, there's a lot of cops in that area, isn't it? And isn't there a lot of crime that goes on?" And so before I even got entered into the legal system officially at 14 in juvenile, I was already seen as a bad person and criminal. And I already started to embody that. and was already kind of living up to this idea of who I was supposed to be. And in my neighborhood, it was one of the top neighborhoods in areas that produced, we produced, some NFL players and NBA players that are in the league now, actually. Actually probably finished up. But it was like making it in the streets, or you make it in as a pro athlete, and those were kind of the options. And I took upon myself to really accelerate, push on the gas in those two directions. And that led to me getting arrested at that, and moving into the juvenile system, and then just it really snowballed from there.
When you graduated high school, did uh, you know, knowing that you competed in collegiate football, uh, did you have any scholarships
Yeah,
or?
so I got a scholarship, and as I was mentioning, I was a track star. I went to state in track, and I ended up getting a football scholarship to play at this school called Lindenwood. And by by the time I entered in college, I was just kind of to my neck in just problems and legal trouble and psychological and emotional crises. And I was really kind of in too deep to turn around. So outwardly, I had, this scholarship, and it looked like I had made it out of this area, with the option that you either make it in the streets or you make it in sports. And it had looked like I made it out, and was going in this direction, and at least was going to get a college degree. But I was already so deeply entrenched. I was mentioning right before we jumped on, this individual that was one of my biggest, like the drug dealer that really introduced me into like this crazy level of selling drugs and moving a lot of weight. And he was this high school dropout. And he was just he was just had just before I met him, I had been smoking a little weed, selling a couple of bags to make up for smoking a little weed. And then when I met him, it was just like he just was throwing pounds, dozens of pounds of weed my way, and coke and pills, and just always carried around a gun on him, and used kind of this violence as this way of like making his self known. And I got entangled with him, and that just led down this path of making a lot of money, but then just getting involved in just some very dangerous activity that by the time I made it into college, I was unable to really. I was already like thinking like, man, this is crazy. Like I don't want to be doing this, but I was too deeply entangled in selling drugs at that time.
I want to say it was earlier this year. I published an episode where I interviewed. Um, his name is Steve-O. He's a local firefighter, guy that I worked with for a number of years. Just a great guy, and his family is Haitian immigrants, and there were, I know that time frame that you're talking about where there was a lot of immigrants from Haiti.
Yeah.
Um, some of them good, and some of them, you know, they were responsible for a lot of crime. And but talking with Steve-O, he I mean, that's what you're saying. I mean, that was the environment that he grew up in. That was what he knew. He used football to get out of there. And I mean, he played collegiate football. It looked like he was going to get a contract in the NFL, and that didn't work out. So he came back and became a firefighter. And for the
Yeah.
longest time, he was at the fire station that served that area that he grew up in.
Wow.
And from working there myself, it's a really rough area.
Yeah.
It's this one neighborhood. There's one entrance in, and that's the way you come and go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it looked like a war zone. Um, it was a rough area. We called it Little Mogadishu. And I think the locals that live there. Um, so there's another area that is referred to as Chapa City because of all the police helicopters. And
Yeah.
I don't. I mean, he talks about his experience there, and you know what you're saying is that those were the two options. Either you get out by playing football, or you become a drug dealer, or you make your
Yeah.
living through crime. And I mean, when that's what you know, or if that's what's available to you, I mean, of course,
Right.
you got to survive.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean that's it definitely that and I always want to just throw in there that despite I don't ever want to paint the picture because I've had people as I share my story, some people get upset that that to say that you still had your own I made those decisions, right, is what I'm getting at. So this is not to take away any responsibility or accountability on me that I did make those decisions, because there's people that I grew up with that obviously, didn't go to prison and didn't make those decisions I made. So I made those decisions, but those, there are those factors that are real factors that, obviously were a big heavy fact reason that people like myself end up going to prison. These, what I've explained without using the word yet is the school to prison pipeline. So the school to prison pipeline is is like a machine in this particular area of the country, like St. Louis, in this particular area of St. Louis, North St. Louis. There are people that don't go to prison, but there are a lot of people that end up going to prison. And, it's this machine of this is the viewpoint, these are the options that are the most apparent options present to the individuals. Now, people make their choices, but when that's what you're primarily presented with, it's hard as a kid to really think outside of that. But nonetheless, I made those choices and I continue to make those choices. And then even into, moving into college, I eventually ended up getting two additional felony charges. Um, and that led to me sitting in front of a judge facing 20 years to life in prison for drug trafficking charges, and eventually getting sentenced to 10 years in prison as a prior and persistent career criminal. And in that process, I can recall the prosecutor was actually pushing for 20 to life because she felt that I had no hope for changing the decisions that I had been making up until that time, and thought that she felt that I was going to be part of this revolving door of incarceration, as so many are that look like me, that come from the places and areas that I come from. So it wasn't too much of this wild crystal ball idea that she thought that I was going to be trapped in this revolving door. Fortunately for me, fast forward some time, I did my time. As you said in the beginning, I'm now Dr. Stanley Andrisse, endocrinologist, scientist, professor at Howard University College of Medicine, also at Johns Hopkins, Georgetown, Imperial. So I did live up to the expectations of that prosecutor. Um, but what's saddening is that so many people that are in my situation do fall into exactly what this prosecutor kind of had prophesized. And for me, like, having been through the things that I went through growing up in St. Louis, and then going into prison, and then the things that happened in prison and making it out of prison and being where I am now, that was being able to navigate through those different hoops, hurdles, challenges. Uh, it was, I couldn't see myself not having not reaching back and trying to help the next person get through those challenges. And that was kind of the whole way. And I can certainly fill in some of the blank, but just to jump to the part of, I eventually started this organization, which is From Prison Cells to PhD. It shares the same name as the book, and the name is kind of this literal journey that I took, but it's more of this metaphor of going from a place of desolate despair and hopelessness to a feeling to a place of self-value, self-worth, and feeling like you have purpose. um and for me, that started in this, in my prison cell. When I first got into prison, I was very much, I was in my early 20s, and I just had this prosecutor painting this picture of me as this like monster, like this, oh my goodness, the biggest drug dealer to ever hit the area, and dangerous, carries guns, and has this amount of money on them. This is not some small neighborhood high school drug dealer. This is a very dangerous person. So she, all that most very much was kind of true. Did you have something?
And yeah, and you were hiding out as a football player, huh?
Yeah, and so actually, what was like, and what really actually hit me as a big dagger, because I believed it. So that was the argument that we were presenting, that this is a college kid, like he has potential, like we should show some mercy and like just give him some time, and we think he's gonna be okay. And her idea was that this is his third, every one of his, he had his first felony as a teenager at 14, and every subsequent felony has been this bigger thing. And her argument was, if we let him go this time, this next one, what do you think is going to be? This is, don't get it fooled. What's worse than a street thug? This is her exact words: an educated street thug. So she actually flipped the script on saying it's actually bad that he's in college, and he's still the street thug, and that's all he'll ever be. And I was like, I thought about that, and I went into prison very much like she's right. Like, I'm just this fucking terrible person. Like, what is wrong with me? I have something like seriously psychologically wrong with me to be involved in this type of activity, in which a lot of what she was saying is true, and like the, carrying guns and being involved in these. So I was just thinking to myself, like, she's absolutely correct. And so I went in like, I am gonna be in this revolving door of incarceration. So how do I become a better criminal? And that was a lot of my early time incarcerated, and I fell into kind of some of the criminal thinking and institutionalized thinking of taking part in some of the things inside prison. Um, I was fortunate enough to have this mentor step into my life that saw this different trajectory, and saw a potential that I hadn't really tapped into and believed in or saw in myself. And that tied with me losing my father to type 2 diabetes over the course of about 2 years. um, that led me into this place of like deep emotional despair and depression, and there was some other things going on in my life, and
So
finding, yeah,
let
yeah.
me let me ask you a question. Were you incarcerated when your father passed away?
So when my father was so my father went through about 2 years of complications, and he had a series of heart attacks that um he didn't he actually and actually I should what I should actually say is that that's a part that I would prefer folks to kind of read in the book. So it was it was part of this epiphany moment, um, that I think is just better suited for folks to to get out of the book. But in essence, it was this process of him going in and out of the hospital while I was incarcerated, and having these a series of heart attacks and surgeries where that it was clear that that was the path that he was going on, that led to me wanting to change my life, because I got to this point that my father used to tell me this phrase that is the title, the subtitle of the book. It is never too late to do good. And that is actually, my family and I, we spoke Creole growing up. And that was, the first language I learned in the household. And so, he actually spoke mostly Creole to me. And the phrase is actually "Il ne j'aime pas toi tapu fait bien." And he would just say this to me a lot over the course when I was a teenager and selling drugs and getting deeper and deeper into the criminal legal system. And before I went away, I actually hadn't talked to him for some time, and we kind of fell off for reasons of one of the like just getting deeper involved in selling drugs in the criminal legal system. So you know, I had lost contact with him, and then he went through this spell of sickness and hospitalization, and that was actually like my epiphany moment. A lot of people ask, like, why did I decide to go through this change? And that was a big part of it, is those words just lingering. His idea of it is never too late to do good. And the reason that I chose that as the subtitle of the book is just such an appropriate uh concept for the criminal legal system, where in our conversation earlier today, or just now earlier in this conversation, as you're talking about some of the Haitian people, the activities that some of the people were doing in the area, um and you're like, some of them truly were doing some pretty scary, criminal, dangerous things. And his phrase is that it's never too late. It's never too late to do good. It was the real meaning of it was, it's never the meaning in its Creole sense was, it is never too late to reach your full potential, and it's never too late to do the right thing. And it was this idea that he believed that, I can see and I know and I believe that you have the ability to change, and that you have the ability to bring value into this world. I'm just waiting for you to see it. And I think that, and I believe that you will get there. Our system doesn't believe that. That's why we sentence people to such long sentences, and that's why we sentence people to life, and why we sentence people to death, is because we don't believe that people can change. We sentence drug dealers to 20, 30 years. And that's saying that we don't believe in your capacity to change and see the world differently. um and it was just that hitting me as I was losing him, that really helped me reach this place of, like, I need to change my life. And um that was a big part of it.
And who was your mentor? Was it another inmate?
No, so I was in school before I went off to and was sentenced to prison. And interestingly, I had um actually just graduated college. And then about 2 weeks later, as all my friends were still partying from, graduating school, I was sitting in that courtroom looking at 20 years to life, and then getting sentenced to prison. Um, but I actually met this professor, and he ended up writing a letter, a recommendation letter for me to get into a fellowship. And it said a bunch of good things about me, and talked about my intellectual capacity. And so I slipped this, my lawyer, when I was being sentenced, I had all these bad things against me. So he wanted to build a pile of good things. And so I slipped it into my pile of good things, and the prosecutor I thought it was a fake letter because it wasn't addressed to the court. I was too ashamed and just really thought that, if I asked him to write a letter, that he would never write one, or, and so I slipped this letter and they contact him, and she asked, do you know this guy, Stanley Andrisse? He's this criminal. He's facing 20 years to life in prison. And he was like, what? Like, Stan? What? And then so he calls me into his office, and this is before I went away to prison. And I told him about everything. I thought he was going to just throw me away and dismiss me like everyone else, but he ended up testifying in court, and continuing to stay in contact with me.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I talk about this quite a bit, the importance of like your experience and what you're giving back to your community now. It's directly linked to your experiences and crashing and burning, and like that there is a way out, and you've shown it.
Yeah.
You're the example. And so many times, and this is something that I think a lot of people don't recognize or allow themselves to see, is that in areas, in urban areas where there is a a high incidence of crime and
Yeah.
poverty and all that stuff, and like you were talking about it being predominantly black, and the white faces that you see are the ones that are trying to catch you doing something,
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
and so there's an adversarial relationship, and you don't see a lot of guys that look like you trying to help you out.
Pull people out. Yeah. Yeah.
and
And
and so my friend Steve, that he wanted to be that example, because he's like, the guys that were there for me, uh there's some black firefighters that he came in contact with, that through sports and just trying to be a mentor and that kind of thing.
yeah,
I mean,
showed them a
that's
different way.
well, that's what we need in this world, is men and women like you that have been there. And
Yeah.
like there's no, I think sometimes in talking with different people with your background, um sometimes there's some shame, and you alluded to it. uh if you make it out, you don't want to go back.
Yeah.
um
Yeah. What
there's a level of courage that's required. I mean, that's
yeah.
so kudos to you, man. I am pretty blown away. Like, and I'm sorry that I cut you off. Please continue.
No, I mean, you're what so now, I mean, to talk a little bit about, the organization. I mentioned that the idea started in prison. It was during this change. There was a friend that I was kind of became close with, and was telling him, as I'm going through this epiphany, and in prison, you're not allowed to cry. That could bring you harm. You're not being angry can bring you harm. Like regular human emotions, you're not allowed to do. So it's like not a place that you can share like deep emotional things with folks, because it's actually literally dangerous to do. I got close with, a friend that we were able to kind of get to that place. And I was telling him this is not it for me. Like I'm gonna get out, and like I'm gonna be a doctor, man. Like that's what. And he's like, what the what are you talking about? You're crazy, man. Do you see where we're at? Do you see that? Like, okay, okay. And then we just continue to have these conversations where I'd share, we kind of dream about like how could we change things. But it was all kind of fantasy. But then when I got out a little bit before him, and I got into school. And by the way, one thing that I didn't mention is, like as it was time for me to be released, with the help of this mentor, started putting together these applications, because he was encouraging me like, you have to continue your education. Um, And I put together, just took months and months to put these applications together, and just rejection after rejection after rejection. The only place I ended up getting accepted to was St. Louis University, where he was on the admissions committee at. So I get out and I get into St. Louis University, and I'm doing very well. I actually complete my MBA and PhD in just 4 years at the top of my class, and then move on to Hopkins and some of those other places. But as I'm getting out and going through these things, I'm like telling this friend about, like this is it. Like this is, this idea of what education can do for you is really the change maker, the transformative change maker. And like, I want to present this to everyone, to other people. And so when he got out, I helped him use education as this like tool to help change the way you see the world, um, and use it as a vehicle to get from A to B is really what we saw. And we started doing that with a couple of people. But then eventually, after we helped a few friends, we had this idea like, man, like what if we can help a whole bunch of people kind of navigate through these hurdles? And because, you know, I was fortunate enough to have this mentor who helped me navigate through the hurdles of, like, had I not had him vouching for me on the back end, I would have got rejected from St. Louis University. Just, I found out in later years that, as they were deciding to accept me, it was him urging the others, his colleagues, to give this person a chance, that even got me in. So I learned that, like, without having this support system and people in places to really help pull you through some of the hurdles and challenges, it's almost impossible to get through. And so, that's what we started the organization to do, just that, like help people navigate those challenges. And 5 years in as like an official 501(c)(3), we've now connected with thousands of individuals, over 2,000 individuals we've connected with. About 300 people have gone through our program, which is we're very excited about that number. Um, but we're now in 35 states. We have a footprint in 35 states. We connected with people internationally. Like our next 5 years, we really see like this exponential growth of this idea that we have of using education over incarceration, using education to combat incarceration, and really helping people understand that it's never too late to do good. It's never too late to reach your full potential. It's never too late to reach your dreams. And we've literally just been, we have astrophysicists in our network. We have people that are in law school and medical school, PhDs, to people that are working on electrical trades and plumbing and construction, and helping people not just get CDLs, but start trucking companies, to really help them elevate, to that next level of building a career. Um, and it's really exciting. What we really see ourselves as changing the narrative, like helping society. Like we want to help the individual change their narrative and help them rewrite their story. But the real magic will come when we start to help society change the narrative of what it is, what a person with a criminal conviction is capable of. Like what somebody who was causing all this harm in our society, like if we don't help them see the value that they can bring, they'll just continue causing harm in our society. Like who
Right.
is that helping?
Right.
So we really want to, and by the time people are in their 30s and 40s, like they don't want to be doing the stuff that they were doing when they were teenagers. Like that's everyone, like every person, no matter if you've been through the criminal legal system, by the time, you age out of that type of thinking. But the unfortunate thing for people with criminal convictions, they know, they don't have the same options and access and opportunities. So they have to continue, not have to, again, that's not quite the right word, but they're kind of put in this place where doing those same things are, are options that are used to survive. And we want to help change that perception and help society understand that we need to be providing more opportunity for folks to help them as they reenter society.
Can you tell me a little bit about the process? Say I'm in prison right now and I hear about you guys. How do I get, uh, is there an application process? I mean, how do I get
Yeah.
involved with you? And
So
then I have this, it's going to be a series of questions. Let me get it out before I forget. So, how do I get involved with you? And then when I complete your program, am I able to get involved with you to be a mentor to somebody else?
oh, most definitely. That is actually to answer that question first. That is our part of our sustainability model. Almost. So we have about 30 team members, paid team members, or people on staff, and 85% of them are formerly incarcerated, and almost nearly 100% are people that were participants in the program. So we hire a lot of our past scholars, is what we call our participants, and nearly 100 every one of our scholars in the program are assigned a formerly incarcerated mentor and a non-formerly incarcerated mentor that and we make sure that it's paired up on like a career trajectory, like one of those two people or both of them are in the career path that the person wants to pursue. um, and almost 100% of our formerly incarcerated mentors are past scholars. So yes, we 100%, and we they go through a training process. The program is in itself kind of this process of how to like engage in the work in helping change the narrative. And we also do a lot of policy and advocacy work, and that's also another pipeline of people that go through the program. We equip them with the tools on how to share their story and how to help enact change by sharing their story and get involved, like civically engaged and politically engaged. And um, so yes, to that part. And then to how they find us, it's a number of different ways. So we connect with people on the outside, so formerly incarcerated people. And that's really through our word of mouth and through our networks. We've moved into the space where, we're thought of as thought leaders in the field of, particularly in the field of higher education in and after prison. So how to promote higher education, what higher education should look like for people in prison. We're kind of seen as experts in that area. So all of these people in the field know about us, and they're telling people in their programs about us to, because a lot of these providers are non-formally incarcerated people. So a lot of the people, like your friend, I think you mentioned you had a friend that taught in high school. I don't know. I mean, you didn't tell me if he was incarcerated or formerly incarcerated or not. But oftentimes, people that go into prisons to teach are not formally incarcerated, right?
Right.
And so a lot of those folks, we've now created this space and understanding that, like, to really be successful with helping someone put their life back together, you need to put them in contact with people who've been through those experiences. So a lot of these people in the space know to contact us. Like when you need a support system for your students to help them get through this thing called reentry and putting your life back together, you need to contact P2P. P2P will help you find that support system on how to put your life back together. So a lot of people find us through our many partners all across the nation, who are already working inside prisons. And then when their students are getting out, they're like, we don't know how to do this. P2P knows how to do it better than we do. So that's one way. And then we're inside 6 prisons. So, the people inside those 6 prisons are able to connect with our program through the different outreach that we do within the prison. And we generally can accommodate about 50 people at the moment, and that's kind of this idea of like we're growing per year, but we generally have about 400 people apply at one facility throughout the year to like get in, and we have space for about 50 to 60 of those folks. I should go ahead and give a shout out to one of our big partner networks. It's called STEM Ops. It stands for STEM Opportunities in Prison Settings. It's a partnership with Princeton, Vanderbilt, organization called Education Development Center and Operation Restoration. Princeton and Vanderbilt are running like college and prison programming. Um, and so we got $5.5 million from the National Science Foundation to build this network to really promote the idea of STEM education as opposed to just like general ed, which is oftentimes what's taught. There's this idea that people in prison aren't smart enough for STEM. Um,
And just
the
for
other shout
those
out,
that might not know what STEM is, science,
yes,
technology, engineering, and math.
yeah, science, technology, engineering, and math. And um, you know, STEM is actually, there's the stigma of STEM not being for even, you don't even have to have a criminal conviction for society to tell you that STEM is not for you. So, STEM has always been kind of reserved as this place. And so we're looking to break that stereotype. And, we've been building this network to uh, fuel the job market. There's a big rise in like tech jobs and computer programming jobs, and why not fill those with this group of people that are really looking for jobs that have all this talent. So we're making that connection, and we actually also got a good amount of funding from the National Institutes of Health to build this literal prison to college pipeline where they start off in prison, they move to a community college, all paid for, and then they move on to Howard University, where I'm a faculty at, and paid for as well as getting a stipend. So we're really excited about some of we're literally reversing that school to prison pipeline and creating now this prison to college and STEM pipeline. And just very excited. And we really feel in the next 5 years that instead of reaching, we're now reaching about 150 people per year in our program. We really see that exponentially increasing to reaching, over 1,000 plus people per year in the very near future.
One of the things that you mentioned earlier was something that a lot of men shy away from talking about, and that's the impact to your mental health. And, you know, I know that there's a level of machismo that, I mean, you have to be quote unquote like manly when you enter the system, or
Yeah,
when you're working the streets, and you
yeah,
have to convey this presence of like, you better not
yeah,
mess with me. And
yeah,
to show any kind of emotion would be, other than anger, rage, like
right,
that's acceptable emotion. but,
right,
but to actually be able to embrace the fact that you're depressed because like you didn't want to be there, um
right.
the emotional impact, the mental health aspect of, well, not just going into prison, but what about the environment that you grew up in? And when you're
Yeah,
recognizing that there's people that have a lot more than you, how did they get it? Oh,
right.
I'll never be able to get that. And here's where I can get something, and so I feel like there's that other aspect of, well, when you're helping these individuals make that transition and um,
Yeah.
move into higher education, do you address any of the
Oh,
mental health?
most that is actually, I mean, you've hit that is the number one thing that we really address. Like one of the first thing, the program is really built to help them understand that they're being brought into this family and they have this community of support. And in that, we really help them understand the idea of letting themselves be vulnerable, and like coming to this place of understanding vulnerability and opening up and feeling some of the like letting yourself feel. A lot of times, like for me, I had I can recall I had actually turned off my ability to cry. Like in prison, like I just did not cry. And it was kind of like this thing that I turned off. And you know, I can recall I ended up getting this coaching job from this one of my former high school coaches, coaching this team, this basketball team for a month. And right before our first game, I walk into the locker room. I missed the coach's call. And he tells me that I've actually been fired, and I'm actually they put out a uh, I couldn't be within a certain distance of the students, or I'd get rearrested. Like, so I was actually violating, just walking into the locker room. I was violating that. And I had, you know, I had built this like incredible relationship with these kids. And I just remember walking back to my car and just like breaking down into tears. And that was like one of the first times that I really like let myself cry since I had gotten out of prison. And I come to, and that's also right around the time that I started to realize like how much emotional and psychological damage prison did to me. I was um I was very much unaware that prison had caused so much psychological and emotional damage to me. I thought that I had kind of went through unscathed, and that's one of the biggest things that I had this misconception of. So, you know, through my experience and learning, we've incorporated that into the program, where one of the biggest things is helping people understand the need for healing, and you know, the need for really understanding and unpacking some of the things that you went through in prison, before prison, after prison. Um, and so it is a huge part, and it's kind of, you know, once we help them understand that there's this process of healing and forgiveness, even that they need to give to themselves and possibly others in their lives that, you know, took part in some of the trauma. Until they get through, until I got through that, in our experience, until people get through that, it's just very challenging to like have the internal like mental capacity to be pushing towards your best self, and pushing towards a career. So it absolutely is one of the key things. And their statistics will say, you know, 75% of people leave prison with some type of psychological challenges, whether it be minor or more severe, you know, PTSD, schizophrenia. And a lot of people enter in prison with some of those challenges. But even if you didn't enter in with them, you know, you end up leaving with them. And so not addressing them, there's a big part of our program where we provide mental health, provide, you know, connection to mental health providers. So certainly is just a huge part of doing this work.
I've talked about it on the show. I've talked about it quite a bit, actually, in interviews that I've done, on other podcasts, other shows, where I've referenced ACEs, and I'm certain that you're
Yeah.
aware of it. Um, and I've actually got some of the statistics related to the ACE study. And ACE is an acronym for Adverse Childhood Experiences. And, you know, on a scale of 1 to 10, the higher your score, the more
Yeah.
likely you are to end up in either prison or dead, or, you know, have overdosed on
Mental health,
drugs or whatever.
physical health. Yeah.
And yeah, and that was how they even came around to realizing uh, that there's all these adverse childhood experiences that impact us when we're young. Is they were studying, um, you know, obese
People who,
children.
yeah.
And
Yeah.
so on my website, hollenbachleadership.com, on the resources page, I have this little thing with all the statistics. and the 10 areas that
Right.
are evaluated, the emotional abuse. And this is like, if you're the person that's, grading your ACE score and you want to learn more about it, just ask yourself this: have you ever, as a child, experienced emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional neglect, physical neglect? Did you witness your mother being battered? Were you in a family where there was parental separation or divorce? Was there mental illness in the household? Was one of your siblings, or just was there somebody living in your household that had mental illness? Was there substance abuse in the household, whether it's, you know, drunkenness or, drug use? It could be prescription drug use.
Right.
And then uh, whether or not a member of your household had been incarcerated.
Yeah.
So those 10 things, and the higher your score, well, one, the more susceptible you are to other forms of mental
Diseases.
illness,
And
diseases,
yeah, yeah.
but PTSD. So now when you're entering in to the prison system and the stuff that you experience in there, what you witness,
Yeah.
I mean, I've interviewed corrections officers that are suffering from PTSD
Yeah.
from witnessing things, and
Yeah, yeah.
um, it's incredible, and I think a lot of times we forget that as children, you know, we experience things that set us up
Yeah.
to view the world through
Right.
a certain lens.
I mean that's the whole thing is, as I was mentioning with being 8 years old and having a cop pull a gun on me and just the reason that the aces, one of the reasons that the aces is such a to have those types of events happen to you in your formative years is really why the aces are such an impactful thing because your brain is still forming. So for me, I know that it triggered this thing that said that I'm a criminal. Like like having those experiences and being around that environment, that resulted in me saying that people around here are criminals. So I guess that includes me too. And so the challenge with that, because if you think about it, like having those experiences are more dangerous to have, witnessing those things and having those experiences as a child are even more dangerous than, witnessing them as an adult, just for the way that the brain processes them. And so that is, of course, it's not as if you experiencing those things as an adult is not going to be traumatic. They still are going to be traumatic. But they're like life altering, there's just a different level of impact when a child is experiencing that because their brain doesn't have the capacity to process as someone with an adult brain does. So
Dr. Andrisse, I want to thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today. Your book, From Prison Cells to PhD, it is never too late to do good. Um, uh, Again, I forget what you told me about it earning, bestseller status in what genre?
it was the number one new release in educator biographies on Amazon.
So my book just released in October, and I don't, it's a pretty darn good book too, so you guys out
Congrats.
there need to give me some reviews if you would. But yeah, it's not a bestseller or anything like that, so
Not
maybe,
yet.
yeah, not yet, maybe I can get it. But you know all the work that you're doing. And I love this conversation that we've had because I've interviewed, veterans, mental health professionals, uh, you know, corrections officers, police officers, firefighters, and it's one of the things that I've talked about so often is that we're all the same. We all make decisions in our life. We all have the potential to fail or succeed.
Yeah.
When we're pushing ourselves, when we're trying to achieve more, when we're risking a lot, sometimes we lose a lot.
Yeah.
And failing is just part of the journey. It's what we do with that that defines us. If we can
I agree.
allow that experience to refine us, it gives us the ability to offer that hand up to the person behind us that
Yeah.
falls on their face. And what you're doing right now is a perfect example of that. And man, I just want to thank you for all that you're doing, the example that you're
Yeah.
setting, and just love this conversation, man. It was great. So I feel honored.
Yes.
Thank you.
No, thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Now, for those that are listening, what is the best place for people to connect with you, buy your book, and maybe there's somebody very wealthy that wants to give you a lot of money to help your cause. um, the
Yeah.
your one website that I already put in the show notes is the from prison cells to phd.org. You mentioned a
Yes.
couple of other websites. What are
Yeah, just
those?
to find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn. You can find us at prison, the number two pro, so at prison two pro. And then my personal handle is at Professor Andrisse. That's at PROF underscore Andrisse, ANDRISSE. And we have a very strong social media following. We have a awesome communications team that we're just pumping out some of our scholar stories and some of the work that we're doing in the field and work that others are doing. So if you really want to get engaged and learn more about this work, certainly follow us. If you really want to be part of the work that we do, we have over 200 volunteers that really help us connect and do our work. And there's a number of different ways that you can be a part of that. So certainly reach out and check us out on social media or our website, from prison cells to phd.org.
Awesome. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of From Embers to Excellence. Please visit hollenbachleadership.com for additional content, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a review.